In the farthest reaches of the Andromeda Veil, where stars blinked like sleepy eyes and nebulae painted the sky in swirls of violet and gold, floated the royal palace of Zeuanthera, a colossal structure carved from living crystal that pulsed with ancient energy. It hung in orbit above the planet Xylos Prime, a world where gravity danced gently and time seemed to stretch like warm taffy. The palace shimmered with iridescent light, its spires reaching into the void like fingers grasping at destiny. Inside, corridors hummed with soft chimes. Walls shifted subtly to accommodate footsteps, and holographic tapestries told stories older than memory. This was no ordinary kingdom. Here, the rulers were not just monarchs. They were stewards of cosmic balance, keepers of peace across 17 star systems. And at its heart sat Queen Lysara, a towering figure with skin the deep purple of twilight storms and hair like spun moonlight, cascading down her back in waves of silver white. Her presence commanded silence without speaking, respect without demanding. She ruled with wisdom forged in war and tempered by sorrow, her husband lost defending their realm, her people once scattered, now thriving under her careful hand. Her daughter, Princess Naira, was the jewel of the Zeuantheri Empire. Just past her coming-of-age ceremony, she carried herself with playful grace, eyes bright with curiosity and mischief. Unlike her mother's regal restraint, Naira sparkled with restless energy, often sneaking off the palace grounds in disguise to explore the floating markets or listen to street poets sing ballads about forgotten heroes. Her skin glowed faintly lavender in dim light, and her white hair curled playfully around her shoulders like frost on glass. Though trained in diplomacy and telepathic defense, Naira dreamed more of adventure than protocol. She disliked stiff gowns, hated sitting still during council meetings, and rolled her eyes every time an ambassador proposed a political marriage. "I'll marry when I find someone who laughs at my terrible jokes," she'd say, flipping upside down on gravity-defying furniture while servants scrambled to catch her ceremonial sash. It was during one such forbidden excursion, disguised as a common artisan, wearing a hooded cloak and smudged face paint, that Naira found herself cornered in the asteroid bazaar of Sector 9. The marketplace buzzed with life. Insectoid traders haggling over glowing minerals, amphibious merchants selling bottled starlight, and robotic nomads reciting poetry in binary code. But beneath the festive chaos lurked danger. A rogue faction known as the Kragath, exiled warlords turned mercenaries, had slipped through the planetary shields. Their armor clanked like thunder, their red eyes scanning for high-value targets. When they spotted the telltale shimmer of royal-grade biosignature leaking from Naira's poorly concealed wristband, they moved fast. She tried to run, darting between stalls and leaping onto hovering carts, but the Kragath were relentless. One fired a pulse net that crackled through the air, nearly snagging her ankle. Another raised a sonic disruptor, aiming to stun before capture. Panic flared in her chest. If taken, she knew what awaited her. Ransom demands, public humiliation, perhaps even forced mind wipe to erase her identity. She reached for her emergency beacon, but it fizzled out, damaged in the chase. Just as a massive clawed hand lunged toward her, something unexpected happened. A blur crashed into the lead attacker. A human male, small by alien standards, clad in a battered exosuit cobbled together from scavenged tech. He wasn't tall nor particularly muscular, but he moved with startling precision. His name was Torin Vexley, though no one in that market knew it. Once a cargo pilot from Earth's outer colonies, he'd spent years drifting between systems, fixing broken ships, avoiding authority, and surviving on wit and leftover rations. He hadn't planned on being a hero. In fact, he'd only come to the bazaar to trade a malfunctioning grav engine for food. But when he saw the purple-skinned girl about to be snatched, something inside him snapped. Not duty, not logic, but instinct. Like seeing a bird caught in wire and knowing you have to cut it free, even if your hands bleed. Torin didn't hesitate. He slammed his shoulder into the first Kragath warrior, knocking him sideways into a stall-selling sentient jellyfish, which promptly shrieked in 4 octaves. Then, with a grunt, he activated the last charge in his personal defense shield, a flickering blue dome barely wider than his body. He shoved Naira behind him just as 3 energy blasts screamed toward them. The shield flared violently, absorbing the hits with screeching feedback. Sparks flew. Smoke curled from the device's cracked housing. On the 3rd impact, it gave out with a sound like breaking ice, collapsing into useless scrap metal. Torin staggered but stayed standing, arms spread wide. "Run!" he shouted at Naira, voice rough from years of shouting over engine noise. "Get out of here!" But Naira didn't run. Instead, She stepped forward, raised her palms, and unleashed a controlled burst of psychic resonance. A skill taught only to royalty. The air vibrated. The Kragath warriors clutched their helmets, roaring in disorientation as their neural implants overloaded. In that moment of confusion, Torin grabbed a discarded shock baton from a fallen vendor and swung hard, disarming one attacker. Naira kicked another in the knee joint, a move she'd learned from watching combat holos, then used a merchant's floating display platform to launch herself into the air, landing gracefully behind the group. Security forces arrived moments later, summoned by automated distress signals from nearby drones. The Kragath were rounded up, dazed and sparking, dragged away in anti-grav cuffs. The crowd erupted in cheers. Someone handed Torin a drink, fermented space melon juice, sour and fizzy, and patted him on the back so hard he coughed. Naira approached him slowly, her earlier bravado replaced by something softer. She looked at the ruined shield in his hands, then at the scorched marks on his suit. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. Torin wiped soot from his cheek. "Yeah, well, you'd have done the same. I wouldn't have had a shield to break," she admitted with a smirk. He laughed. A dry, surprised sound, like rusted gears turning after decades of stillness. "Lucky me, then." They stood there amid the wreckage of the market, surrounded by blinking lights and murmuring onlookers. Two beings from entirely different worlds, connected now by a single act of courage neither could explain. Neither noticed the tiny surveillance orb hovering above, transmitting everything to the highest chamber of the royal palace. Queen Lysara watched the footage in silence, seated upon her throne of resonant quartz. Her expression remained unreadable, but her fingers tightened slightly around the armrests, which responded by glowing a deeper shade of indigo. She saw every second, the ambush, the human's reckless charge, the way he placed himself between danger and her daughter without hesitation. She saw how he fought not for glory, but protection. How, even after his shield failed, he didn't flee. And she saw the look in Naira's eyes when she turned to him afterward. Not gratitude alone, but something warmer, something dangerous. "Bring him to the palace," she ordered, her voice echoing through the chamber like distant thunder. "Alive, unharmed, and bring the data logs. All of them." 3 days later, Torin stood in the grand atrium of the royal palace, feeling profoundly out of place. He had been scrubbed clean by automated hygiene pods, dressed in formal guest robes of shimmering gray silk, though he kept his boots, arguing they were good luck, and escorted by 6 silent guards with glowing eyes and floating halberds. The atrium soared above him, a cathedral of light and sound, where gravity subtly lessened near the ceiling, allowing fountains to spiral upward like liquid helixes. Bioluminescent vines climbed the pillars, blooming softly with each passing breath of air. At the far end of the hall, atop a dais woven from solidified starlight, sat Queen Lysara. Beside her, shifting impatiently, was Naira, wearing a gown that shifted colors with her mood, currently swirling between pink and gold. Torin swallowed hard. He'd faced asteroid pirates, survived decompression in deep space, and negotiated with a hive mind of silicon beetles, but nothing compared to the quiet intensity of that royal gaze. "You are Torin Vexley," the queen began, her voice resonating through the chamber. "Former pilot of the freighter Mara's Luck. No criminal record. Minor infractions. Unauthorized docking, tax evasion, minor, possession of contraband snack cakes from Jupiter Station." Torin scratched his neck. "Those were medicinal. Space rations give me indigestion." A ripple of amusement passed through the observing courtiers. Even Naira covered her mouth to hide a giggle. The queen allowed herself the ghost of a smile. "You broke your defense shield saving my daughter. That device was likely all you had against harm in hostile zones. Yet you used it to protect someone you did not know." "I knew she was in trouble," Torin said simply. "Didn't need to know her name." Silence fell. Then the queen rose, her height suddenly imposing, her aura pulsing with restrained power. In Zyanthari law, such an act is recognized not as mere bravery, but as Vethral, the unasked sacrifice. By ancient decree, any being who performs Vethral for a member of the royal bloodline is entitled to one boon, regardless of origin, species, or status. Torin blinked. "A boon? A wish?" Naira whispered from the side. "Anything within reason. Shelter, wealth, a ship, even a title." He rubbed his chin. "Can I get a lifetime supply of those chocolate-covered protein bars from Luna Outpost 7? Laughter burst forth this time, louder, freer. Even the queen's lips twitched. "No," she said. "But I will grant you citizenship in the Ziwantheri Dominion, full rights, protection, a home if you desire, and—" She paused, glancing at Naira, whose cheeks flushed lavender. "An invitation to remain at the palace as an honored guest while we determine your future role." Torin opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded slowly. Thanks, I think." That night, as twin moons cast silvery light across the palace gardens, Torin wandered the crystalline pathways, unable to sleep. He'd been given a suite larger than his old spaceship, filled with self-adjusting furniture and a bathroom that sang lullabies. But comfort unsettled him. He was used to cramped quarters, sudden alarms, the constant hum of engines. Here, everything was too perfect, too quiet. He found Naira on a floating balcony overlooking the planet below, her bare feet dangling over the edge, toes wiggling in zero-G. She turned as he approached. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. "Too much luxury," he said, leaning beside her. "Feels like waiting for the other boot to drop." She smiled. "You're not used to people doing nice things for you, are you?" He shrugged. "Nice things usually come with strings. Or audits." Naira giggled, then grew thoughtful. "Mother could have given you money and sent you on your way. But she didn't. She brought you here. Why do you think that is?" Torin exhaled. "Maybe she thinks I'll try to sell palace secrets to smugglers. Or maybe," Naira said softly, "she sees what I saw." He looked at her. "And what's that?" "That you're kind. Even when it makes no sense. Even when it costs you everything." They sat in silence for a while, watching meteor showers streak across the atmosphere like falling wishes. Torin thought about his old life. Endless routes between dead-end colonies, eating freeze-dried noodles, signing fake manifests to avoid tariffs. He thought about how, for the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible. Over the next few weeks, Torin became an odd fixture in the palace. He wasn't quite staff, not quite noble, but something in between. He helped rewire the aging communication array. "Your system runs on ancient junk held together by hope and glitter," he'd muttered while elbow-deep in circuitry. He fixed the malfunctioning gravity lift in the East Wing, jury-rigged a new cooling unit for the Royal Wine Vault, earning eternal gratitude from the head sommelier, a six-eyed creature named Glorb, and once accidentally activated a dormant defense drone that chased the royal chef through the banquet hall while blasting opera music. But it was his interactions with Naira that drew attention. They sparred in the training dome, one using psychic agility, the other relying on clumsy but effective human improvisation. They explored hidden wings of the palace, discovering forgotten libraries filled with scrolls that whispered when touched. They played zero-G tag in the meditation sphere, laughing as they bounced off walls like comets. And sometimes, late at night, they sat on the observatory deck, sharing stories, hers of Stardust prophecies and intergalactic treaties, his of black market fuel runs and dancing robots at border stations. Rumors began to swirl. Courtiers whispered behind glowing fans. Diplomats exchanged knowing glances. Even the palace AI started playing romantic music whenever the two entered the same room. Torin had to reprogram it twice. Then came the Festival of Twin Dawns, the most sacred celebration in the Ziwantheri calendar. For 3 days, the entire empire lit floating lanterns, released harmonic drones into the atmosphere, and performed rituals of unity and renewal. At the heart of the festival was the ceremony of bonds, where lifelong commitments between allies, family, or lovers were publicly honored. On the final night, beneath a sky streaked with auroras, Queen Lysara stood before the gathered assembly. Her voice amplified across the palace grounds and broadcast to every colony in the realm. "People of Ziwanthar," she intoned, "we gather not only to celebrate light after darkness, but to honor those who bridge divides. Long have we guarded our traditions, our bloodlines, our ways. But the universe does not stand still, and neither must we." She turned to where Torin stood, awkward in ceremonial robes that kept trying to hug him. "Torin Vexley of Earth," she said. "You came to us as a stranger. You acted not for reward, not for fame, but because it was right. You broke your shield not knowing if you would live, not knowing if anyone would remember your name. And yet, because of you, my daughter breathes. Because of you, our line continues." The crowd stirred. Torin felt his face burn. "Therefore," the queen continued, "by the ancient laws of Vethral, and by the will of this throne, I offer not just citizenship, but kinship. I declare Torin Vexley not merely an ally, but family. And if my daughter agrees—" She glanced at Naira, who stepped forward, her gown now blazing gold, her eyes shining. "If my daughter agrees," the queen repeated, "I call for the union right. Let the bond be sealed not by politics, but by choice. Let love, if it exists, be given the chance to grow. Let the galaxy see that even across stars, hearts may find each other." A gasp swept through the audience. Union rite, the formal betrothal ceremony reserved for royalty and legendary figures. It hadn't been performed in over 2 centuries. Naira took Torin's hand. Her palm was warm, slightly trembling. "Well," she whispered, "what do you say? Want to make galactic history?" He stared at her wild white hair, her mischievous grin, the way her foot tapped nervously despite her brave words. He thought of broken shields, sour space melon juice, singing bathrooms, and the quiet moments on the balcony when the universe felt small and full of possibility. "I don't know how to do any of this," he admitted. "I've never been good with speeches, or fancy titles, or walking on floors that move." She squeezed his hand. "You don't have to be. Just say yes." He took a breath, looked at the queen, who gave the slightest nod, looked at the sky, where a comet blazed across the heavens like a signature. "Yes," he said. The roar that followed shook the very foundations of the palace. Lights exploded in radiant patterns. Harmonic bells rang across the system. Naira threw her arms around him, laughing, and for a moment, Torin forgot how to breathe. The celebrations lasted for days. Feasts stretched into dawn. Dancers from 20 species performed gravity-defying routines. Poets composed epics before breakfast. And somewhere in the chaos, Torin found himself being measured for wedding attire by a team of excitable tailors who kept arguing over whether his outfit should glow or pulse. Amid the festivities, however, shadows stirred. Not all welcomed this union. On the fringes of the empire, whispers slithered through dark channels. The Kragath had not acted alone. Their attack had been funded, directed. A secret cabal, ancient nobles who believed the royal bloodline must remain pure, untouched by lesser species, had orchestrated the ambush, hoping to eliminate Naira and force the queen into naming a traditional successor. They had failed once. They would not fail again. Their agent, a high-ranking advisor named Vraxiel, had watched the ceremony of bonds with cold fury. Now, cloaked in diplomatic immunity, he moved silently through the palace's lower archives, accessing encrypted files, sending coded pulses into the void. The wedding would happen, he decided, but it would not conclude. Meanwhile, Torin struggled with his new role. He attended etiquette lessons, where he accidentally insulted a delegation of gelatinous ambassadors by offering them a handshake. He practiced the Zyanthari wedding vows, which involved synchronized breathing and a brief telepathic exchange that left him dizzy and mumbling about purple elephants. He even tried meditating with the royal priests, only to fall asleep and start snoring so loudly the entire chamber vibrated. But through it all, Naira stood by him. She taught him how to bow without tripping, how to eat the spicy eye-jelly delicacy without crying. He failed, spectacularly. And how to dance the spiral of unity, a slow, floating waltz that required perfect emotional synchronization. "You're doing great," she assured him after he spun her into a potted plant. "I feel like a wrench in a jewelry box," he grumbled. "But a beloved wrench," she teased. "One that fixes things, and looks cute in shiny robes." He groaned. "I miss my old suit. The one with the hole in the knee, and the coffee stains, and the I Heart Suit Pluto patch." She laughed. "We'll frame it. Hang it in the honeymoon suite." He raised an eyebrow. "There's a honeymoon?" "Oh yes," she said, eyes gleaming. "On the floating isles of Mervex. Zero-gravity beaches, crystal waterfalls that flow upward, and beds that hum lullabies." He grinned. "Now you're speaking my language." As the wedding day approached, tension simmered beneath the surface. Security doubled. Psychic wards were reinforced. The queen received anonymous threats encoded in ancient dialects. Yet she remained calm, resolute. She had made her choice and she would defend it. The morning of the ceremony dawned with a sky painted in rainbows. The palace glowed brighter than ever, its crystal heart beating in rhythm with the planet's core. Guests arrived from across the cosmos, diplomats, elders, interstellar celebrities, even a sentient nebula that communicated through color shifts. Torin stood in his chambers, adjusting his collar for the 10th time. His suit, finally completed, was a masterpiece of hybrid design. Human-cut fabric embedded with Zyanthari light threads that responded to emotion. Right now, they pulsed a nervous orange. A knock came at the door. It was Queen Lysara. "You look well," she said simply. Torin swallowed. "I feel like I'm about to pilot a ship into a black hole." She stepped closer. "Do you love her?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes. Not because of titles. Not because of duty. But because she is her. Because she makes me laugh. Because she doesn't care that I don't know which fork to use. Because she stood up to her mom for me. Yeah. I love her." The queen studied him, then nodded. From her robe, she withdrew a small, glowing disk, the size of a coin, pulsing with soft blue light. "This was my husband's," she said. "He gave it to me on our bonding day. It contains a fragment of his consciousness, a whisper of his soul. I kept it sealed until I found someone worthy to carry its legacy." She placed it in Torin's hand. "Wear it beneath your robe. Let it remind you that love is not weakness, that courage comes in many forms, and that protecting what matters is the highest duty of all." Tears pricked Torin's eyes. He clasped the disc tightly. "I won't let you down. You already haven't," she said softly. Down in the grand hall, the ceremony began. Music swelled, part choral hymn, part quantum resonance. Naira descended the spiraling staircase, radiant in a gown woven from starlight and memory thread, her hair crowned with living crystals that bloomed as she walked. Torin met her at the altar, his hand steady now, the light threads in his suit glowing a deep, steady blue. They spoke their vows. They joined hands. They shared the breath of unity, a moment of silent connection where souls brushed against each other in the vastness of existence. Just as the final blessing was about to be spoken, alarms blared. Red lights flashed. The ceiling split open, revealing a swarm of armed drones, black, jagged, marked with the insignia of the Shadow Cabal. From the upper galleries, figures in dark armor emerged, weapons raised. Vraxiel stepped forward, face twisted with contempt. "This union ends now," he declared. "No human will defile the royal blood." Chaos erupted. Guests screamed. Guards mobilized. Energy fire streaked through the hall. But Torin didn't run. He pushed Naira behind him just as he had in the market. He reached for his belt, where, against palace rules, he'd hidden a compact plasma torch, repurposed from a welding tool. The battle that followed was unlike any recorded in Zyanthari history. Torin fought not with elegance but ingenuity, using the environment, redirecting energy beams, sabotaging drones with improvised traps. Naira unleashed her full psychic might, creating force domes, disrupting enemy communications, even briefly levitating an entire row of attackers and dumping them into a decorative fountain. Queen Lysara ascended, her form radiating power, her voice shaking the very fabric of space as she invoked the final edict of sovereignty. And in the midst of it all, Torin and Naira fought side by side, human and alien, different in biology, alike in heart. The coup failed. Vraxiel was captured. The drones deactivated. Peace returned. As dawn broke anew, the ceremony resumed. No one left. If anything, the bond felt stronger, forged in fire. When the final words were spoken, and the union officially sealed, the galaxy watched. News feeds lit up. Planets celebrated. Even rival empires sent cautious congratulations. Torin Vexley, once a nobody from the edge of known space, was now consort of Zyanthar, husband to the princess, son-in-law to the queen. Later, as they floated together on a zero-gravity beach under twin suns, Naira rested her head on his shoulder. "Still think you're a wrench in a jewelry box?" she asked. He smiled, watching the waterfalls rise into the sky. "Nah, I think I fit just fine." And somewhere, deep in the palace vaults, a tiny shield fragment, once broken, now preserved in crystal, glowed faintly, as if remembering the moment everything changed. The days that followed the thwarted coup were not just a celebration of survival, but of unity. Across the Zyanthari Dominion, people gathered in plazas and orbital stations, on desert moons and floating cities, to honor the couple who had defied tradition and stood firm against hatred. Holograms of Torin and Naira, hand in hand, bruised but unbroken, flashed across starship viewscreens and public relays. Children dressed in mismatched human-alien costumes reenacted the wedding battle in school plays. Poets wrote ballads about the shield that broke for love. And somewhere on a backwater trading post, a vendor began selling bootleg action figures. One with scorched armor and a plasma torch, the other with flowing white hair and glowing hands. Back at the royal palace, life settled into a new rhythm, one woven from laughter, compromise, and the occasional zero-gravity food fight. Torin never quite mastered formal court etiquette. He once greeted a visiting dignitary with a casual, "Hey, pal." But he earned respect not through titles, but through action. He redesigned the palace defense grid using scavenge tech and old Earth engineering principles, creating a system so efficient it reduced energy consumption by 60%. He started a training program for young engineers from lower colonies, insisting talent didn't need royal blood to matter. And every morning, without fail, he brought Naira a cup of synth coffee. Terrible by Zuantheri standards, scalding and overbrewed, but made with love. Naira, in turn, blossomed. No longer confined by expectations, she became a voice for interspecies diplomacy, traveling to distant systems to advocate for equality and cultural exchange. She still snuck off to street markets, though now Torin usually tagged along, pretending to be a humble technician while secretly scanning for threats. Their bond grew deeper with each passing season. Not because it was easy, but because they chose it, again and again, through misunderstandings, alien customs, and the time Torin accidentally activated a sacred meditation orb that turned everyone in the chamber temporarily invisible. Years flowed like stardust. One evening, as golden nebulae shimmered beyond the palace dome, Queen Lysara summoned them to the Hall of Ancestors. She stood before the eternal flame, a pillar of blue fire said to burn with the collective spirit of all Zuantheri rulers. "My time as sovereign nears its end," she announced, her voice steady. "The body weakens. The stars whisper my name. It is time to pass the crown." Naira stepped forward, breath caught between pride and sorrow. "Mother!" Lysara smiled, touching her daughter's cheek. "You are ready, and you will not rule alone." She turned to Torin. "You came to us as an outsider, but you have proven that loyalty is not born of blood, but of choice. From this day forward, you shall stand beside her, not as consort, not as guest, but as co-ruler of Zuanthar. Equal in power, equal in heart." Tears welled in Torin's eyes. He had spent his life running from responsibility, dodging authority, surviving on instinct. Now he was being asked to lead an empire. He looked at Naira, who grinned and gave him a small nod. "I'll do my best," he said simply. "And if I mess up, I'll fix it. That's what I do." The coronation was held beneath the open sky of Xylos Prime, where the air sparkled with bioluminescent pollen and the mountains sang harmonic winds. Millions watched as Naira and Torin ascended the Star Walk together, their robes woven from the same fabric, half Zuantheri light silk, half earth-spun carbon weave, symbolizing the union of two worlds. When the twin crowns were placed upon their heads, one glowing with ancient runes, the other embedded with a shard of Torin's broken shield, the entire planet erupted in song. Peace followed, not as the absence of war, but as the presence of hope. Under their rule, the Zuantheri dominion flourished. Outposts once used for military surveillance became schools. Weapon factories were converted into medical research hubs. Diplomatic envoys replaced war fleets. And for the first time in centuries, humans were not just visitors or laborers. They were citizens equals family. But the greatest legacy of their reign wasn't written in laws or treaties. It was written in laughter echoing through palace halls, in tiny feet pattering across crystal floors, in the sound of lullabies sung in two languages. Their first child was a girl named Mira, born under a triple eclipse, her skin a soft lilac hue, her hair a wild mix of snowy white and chestnut brown. She inherited her mother's psychic spark and her father's knack for fixing broken things. By age 3, she had reprogrammed the nursery drone to serve cookies instead of vegetables. The second was Kalen, a boy with Torin's mischievous grin and Naira's luminous eyes. He could float objects with his mind by age 4 and once convinced the palace AI to declare Pajama Day across all government sectors. Then came twins Siri and Joran, born during a solar storm so intense it lit the night sky for weeks. Siri could communicate with animals, including the notoriously grumpy palace space otter, while Joran built functional hover toys out of spoon parts and old batteries. They had 7 children in total, each unique, each loved fiercely. The palace, once a place of rigid silence, became a joyful chaos of bedtime stories, impromptu dance parties, and science experiments that occasionally caused minor gravity fluctuations. Torin taught them how to hotwire a shuttle under supervision, how to make pancakes from scratch, and why duct tape solved 90% of mechanical problems. Naira taught them empathy, balance, and how to listen to the whispers of the universe. Even Queen Lysara stayed close, stepping into the role of grandmother of the cradle, a title she wore with quiet joy. She told the children stories of ancient battles, of love lost and found, and of the brave human who broke his shield for a princess he didn't know. And every year, on the anniversary of the wedding, she would light a single candle and whisper, "He was worth it." As decades passed, Torin's hair turned gray, his steps slower, but his smile never faded. Naira remained radiant, her powers deepening with age, her wisdom sought across galaxies. They traveled less now, but their influence stretched farther than ever. Schools bore their names. Peace accords were signed in their honor. A statue was erected in the capital. Torin, mid-stride, shield shattered, reaching out, not with a weapon, but with an open hand. On quiet evenings, they would sit on the same balcony where they'd shared their first real conversation, watching meteor showers streak across the velvet sky. Their grandchildren would climb onto their laps, begging for the story of how Grandpa saved Grandma from space pirates. And then what happened? Little Lyra would ask, eyes wide. Torin would chuckle. Well, your grandma kicked one in the knee, I zapped another with a toaster, and somehow we ended up here. Naira would squeeze his hand. And we've never looked back. They lived long, loved deeply, and died peacefully. On the same day, holding each other's hands, surrounded by family. According to Zyanthari belief, souls that share true unity return to the stars as paired constellations. And to this day, in the heart of the Andromeda Veil, two bright stars shine side by side. One steady and warm, the other flickering with playful energy. Forever guarding the peace they built, forever reminding the universe that even across impossible distances, love can find a way. And somewhere, in a forgotten drawer of the royal archives, a tiny, broken shield rests inside a case of living crystal. Beneath it, a simple inscription glows. It broke, but we didn't.